Joined now by Rinkwide's Jeff Patterson, our Canucks reporter, and Vancouver snaps. They get back in their winning ways after the Jersey loss. They snap a Minnesota win streak.
Snap their own one-game losing streak, too. That's all they get these days.
Well, I mean, it was a nice bounce back, Jeff, because you knew Coach was spitting mad after the Tuesday game, and this was a pretty good opponent that was on a winning streak and a tidy bit of business last night when they finally got a shot on goal.
Yeah, I think at the end of the night, the Canucks can feel pretty good about taking 2 points from yet another conference opponent, another one of those teams that, I think has designs on getting on a run after making the coaching change. It's impossible to call it a statement win or a perfect game. I mean, when you don't get a shot for the first 14 minutes and the crowd gets on you, and that was quite a Bronx cheer when Ilya Mikheyev finally put a puck on the Minnesota net. But from that point on, I thought the Canucks were pretty good over the final 45 minutes, and particularly in the second period where they barely let Minnesota have the puck. Now, that was aided by a couple of power plays, but there were so many glorious scoring opportunities for the Canucks in the second period that I worried that they might rue the day that some of those opportunities had to find the back of the net because, they go to the third period. It's a 1-0 hockey game. Minnie's just a shot away, and we really hadn't heard from Kirill the Thrill or Matt Zuccarello, and those two have been driving some of this resurgency for the Minnesota Wild. But ultimately, when the Canucks got that second goal, I think a little bit of breathing room, they exhaled. And while Minnesota carried the play in the third, it didn't feel like Casey DeSmith was under siege, didn't have to stand on his head, made the saves he was supposed to. He gets the shutout, and the Canucks get the win.
It felt like a tidy road win that they sort of managed to victory because they just didn't want to have back-to-back losses. And I'm totally fine with that approach, by the way. The question is, can they find a way to do that? Can they get 3 wins in a row, Jeff? Is it too much to ask for them to get 3 wins in a row? Now, can they not just try to do exactly what they did a second night in a row and try to manufacture a little bit of traction here?
Well, I do think it's going to be tough to start stringing wins together when Elias Pettersson remains fairly ineffective. JT Miller has cooled on the goal-scoring side. They were better defensively, obviously, and they had to be compared to the night against New Jersey. But, yeah, I mean, it just kind of feels like when one area of the game is going, other areas are starting to fall off a little bit. And that is the reason for the 1 step forward, 1 step back over a 10-game stretch. So 5-5 now over their last 10, haven't strung back-to-back wins together since the tail end of that Eastern Canadian road trip in Montreal. And then they came home and beat Bo Horvat and the Islanders in overtime. That's the last time that they have put consecutive victories together. So they have that chance on Saturday with Carolina in town. And Carolina is kind of slumping a little bit here. They've lost the first 3 on their Western Canadian road trip. But I just think overall there is inconsistency, particularly at the top of the lineup. And that's something that we didn't say in those first 15 games. And so that's going to be difficult. But I think that's what made the win over Minnesota maybe that much more impressive is it's on the back of a backup goaltender. Nils Höglander, who is carrying the hot hand right now, he scores because it feels like he's scoring just about every night out right now. But also then to get a depth goal and a big one at that to extend the lead to 2-0. So some of the supporting cast stepped up. We've seen that a few other times throughout this season, but it kind of feels like it's being put back at the feet of the top end guys here to elevate their game once again.
Did everybody catch Rod Brindamore's in-game interview in Edmonton? The number of curse words he had to swallow, and then he finishes up. We're probably parking this one already. It was
We're en route to a 50-0 loss.
So an angry bunch coming in here on Saturday night. Jeff, I want to go back to one of your favorite topics, backup goaltending, because Casey DeSmith, 8 starts this year, 16 available points. He's got 5 wins, plus they got a loser point. He's got 11 of the available 16 points for the Canucks and a shutout last night. He is right on track, sir, to meet your markers in terms of what a playoff team needs from its backup goalie.
Yeah, and the more that I find out about Casey DeSmith, like, teammates just rave about this guy. Like, maybe one of the most popular guys in that locker room. And sometimes we see that with other backup goaltenders. They know their role. This guy does. He's been around it. He's been at this for a while. He understands that he's not going to play an awful lot when you've got Thatcher Demko doing the things that Thatcher Demko's done for the most part this season. Hadn't played since that loss in San Jose 10 days ago, and that was a tough one for him. It was a tough one for the team, obviously, and he had lost back-to-back starts. In fact, before that, it was in Calgary. So, he's been a nice story, but when you get your opportunities, few and far between as they are, you got to make the most of them. He wants to play more. Again, he understands the situation here, but I think performances like that one against Minnesota will get him back in the mind of the coach that, hey, maybe we've got to get this guy in here, and maybe Thatcher Demko doesn't need to play 8 of every 9 the way that he had prior to sitting and watching DeSmith deliver the 26 save shutout. So, yeah, you're right. Just in terms of tracking those numbers, hard to argue with his success. Low maintenance guy, just shows up, competes, plays hard, and ultimately makes the saves that he's supposed to. And it is funny and probably defies explanation, but why some guys just seem to have the number of a certain opponent. And Casey DeSmith now 5-0 lifetime against the Minnesota Wild. Well, look who's on the schedule here in just over a week's time. It's the Minnesota Wild again. Like, maybe you already pencil him in for the return match at XL Energy Center.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, when we were crafting today's poll question, we almost put the entirety of that third line, Blueger, Garland, and Joshua together when asking who has been the most pleasant surprise. Well, that third line gets a goal last night. Höglander gets another goal. We put DeSmith and Lafferty on there as well. Which you're voting Höglander here for most pleasant surprise at this stage, Jeff?
Yeah, I just because if you go back to the preseason and training camp, first day of training camp, he's on that line with Pettersson and Kuzmenko, and we thought, wow, what an opportunity. And that lasted like a day or a day and a half. And by the end of preseason, when we thought maybe a full-on dress rehearsal and they had some extra bodies, he was a healthy scratch in the final preseason game. And I started to think, like, what is this guy's role? Or is there a role here with this coach that didn't see him last year? He was demoted before the coaching change. And I just wasn't sure if there was a fit. And if so, where was it? And to his credit, started lower in the lineup, but has forced the issue here, has continued to perform. Look, he forced the trade of Anthony Beauvillier, basically ran a team out of town with the way that he was playing to earn an opportunity to be an every night guy, and now into the top 6. He scored in back-to-back games. He scored in 6 of the last 11. Over the last dozen games, guys, he has scored twice as many even strength goals as any other forward on this hockey club. So, in limited ice time, he's finding ways, and you're starting to ask why some of the others can't do even a little bit of that. So, yeah, I think the levels to which he has risen here in a relatively short period of time with the amount of ice time that he's getting, that's a very pleasant surprise. And just another reminder that he doesn't turn 23 here for a few more weeks. Like, he was a birthday just before Christmas, so one of those late birthdays. And this is a guy that, he's still growing. He's still learning. The other thing, too, is like, he's signed on a very affordable ticket for this year and next. So, as they continue to be a little crunchy around the cap, he can be a guy that they absolutely extract a fair bit of value out of.
The likes of Joshua and Garland continue to impress, and in some ways, in a lot of ways, surprise as well. I look at the expected goals against, Corsi-wise, by the way, those guys were like 50-50 last night. But expected goals tells a better story because it shows when they did give up shots, how inconsequential they are. I don't know that I've ever seen this, Jeff. Dakota Joshua's expected goals against at even strength last night was 0.05. He almost pitched a perfect game. 0.15 for the likes of Garland and Blueger. Not only is Garland a buzzsaw and energy personified, he's making some nice passes, and the opposition is not having a sniff when these guys are on the ice. I mean, as much as the counting stats are not what you'd expect for a guy that's getting the paycheck that Connor Garland is, it's a pretty nice line to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, I have trouble, and I'm always going to have trouble getting past the fact that he's got 2 goals as we approach Christmas. But if you can put that aside, all the underlying metrics, the fact that we saw it again last night, draws penalties, that we talked about the fact that they didn't have a great start. They got the goal, so they go to the dressing room up 1-0. But where I thought the tide really turned in the second was, Connor Garland being a buzzsaw on the forecheck, takes the elbow to the yob, puts the Canucks on the power play, and that started sort of this momentum. They didn't score on that power play, but he draws penalties and gives this team a chance to go to work with a man advantage. And the breakaway pass to Joshua in the third period, the pass to Blueger, obviously a primary assist. So it is remarkable how little time they spend in their own zone. And Rick Tocchet, again, before the game against Minnesota, was sort of instructively telling us the things that Andrei Kuzmenko wasn't doing right on the forecheck. I think that if he does video sessions with his broader group in that locker room, he's probably using that line and the way that they forecheck, and they just stick to the structure that he has put there for them, and they play it to a T. So, yeah, obviously at $5 million or a shade under, you'd like a little more production. This is a guy that has scored 20 plus goals in the National Hockey League and did it for Rick Tocchet in Arizona. So the scoring touches completely evaporated for Connor Garland, to the point, guys, where remember he scored the first goal of the season, sort of alley-oop from Elias Pettersson off the rush against Edmonton. And then his last goal, and this is part of the problem when you can recall them vividly because there are only two of them. But the other goal was in Montreal off the rush, and it was set up by JT Miller. So he's got 2 goals, and none of them have come with his usual and regular line mates this season. And we're bumping up against Christmas here. So in some ways, it's hard to believe. And yet you're right. It's sort of a luxury to have a guy like that on the third line that's out there causing problems. He's a pain to play against. I do wonder a little bit come playoff time, when time and space is taken away, and there are a lot of good teams and big bodies out there, can Connor Garland continue to be effective, or do you need a little bit more at the end of the night in the way of tangible takeaways? But right here, right now, there's no question, sort of the same things that we said about Quinn Hughes, that, it's too small. Hey, his best way of defending is spending most of the night up ice in the offensive zone. And that line, led by Connor Garland, they don't spend a lot of time in their own end.
Could he be a fixer for Pettersson? Do you put that energy, that the passes, does that work with Mikheyev and Pettersson maybe?
When they've tried him higher in the lineup, he's just such a unique character that it's hard to forge chemistry. And we've seen that. They've tried it before. And so in a lot of ways, he's sort of settled into the right kind of role for him, just without any sort of counting statistics, although it was a nice pass to Teddy Bluger, and Teddy Bluger showed some pretty nice hand. Bluger's got the 2 goals, and they've both been pretty ones.
Gorgeous.
The breakaway in Seattle and last night.
Absolutely.
So, and again, some of this is the mystery that is Pius Suter, and we just don't know. But Teddy Bluger has bumped up a little higher in the lineup than he's probably best suited for, but hasn't looked out of place, and that line hasn't skipped a beat.
I was going to ask you, good question by Blake there in terms of how to fix Elias here. What do you want to see more from with him, Jeff? Like what is lacking to you? What would you like to see more of from Elias tomorrow, Saturday against Carolina?
I'd like him to be a little more assertive. This is a guy that has commanded games. When he has been at the top of his game, it's breathtaking to watch. He's a step ahead of most guys out there. And then backs it up by taking advantage of the time and space that he sees that maybe others don't, and those types of things. He's struggling, it feels like, just physically right now to maintain his footing. Like he's back to a few years ago where he was falling all over the ice almost every shift. And I noticed that last night again. Just doesn't seem as stable and as strong on his skates as he has at other times in his career. And so there are times where he'll receive a pass and you think, okay, maybe he's going to make something happen here. And not even check, but just kind of slips on the banana peel. He's down, loses control of the puck, those types of things. So I don't know if that speaks to confidence. I don't know if that speaks to, the idea that there are issues with the core, and that's kind of, some of the stability that he's lacking right now. Whatever the case, he just isn't that dynamic presence out there that he has been. And he certainly was for much of last season and has been at times throughout his career. His line mates, they had a decent run of games here, but, is Sam Lafferty ultimately the right answer to be playing alongside Elias Pettersson? Probably not, but in the short term, that's kind of what the Canucks have and the way that they're going here. But yeah, it just, I'd like to see him assert his will in a hockey game, and I just haven't seen that in a long, long time.
Yeah, well, we'll see about Carolina. That has a good look to it, that one. And then the Florida teams here next week, including Roberto Luongo's Ring of Honor night. We'll catch up on Monday, Jeff. Thanks for this.
All right, guys, have a great weekend.
Happy hour on Sekeres and Price. Today's beer of the day, Yellow Dog's Chase My Tail Pale Ale.